Holy City Center Radio, this is episode 165, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, August 28th, 2023. I got a big week ahead. I'm excited. I'm nervous. I'll tell you a little bit about it here in just a moment. Also had a nice weekend, fairly low-key. I hope yours was as well, and hope your Monday is off to a good start. Yes, it's a new week here in the Holy City. We've got some tropical storms out in the Atlantic. Looks like we might be getting some poor weather later in the week. So I'm sure we'll be dealing with some flooding and rain and who knows what else a little bit later. But for now, it's hot. It's sunny. At least as of recording, that is the case here where I am. But we'll see what the rest of the week brings. The weekend itself for me was pretty quiet. However, after I recorded the last episode on Thursday evening, I was out at Lamar's Sporting Club, which is a new sports bar located in downtown Charleston. It's in the same place. It's on King Street where First Place used to be, which was also a sports bar. But this is a little bit more high end, not that the other sports bar was divey or anything like that, but this will have a more high-end feel to it. I was happy to check out the space. It looks great. Essentially, it's the same layout, of course, as the last place. It's the same owners, Leva and Lamar Bonaparte. And, they also own Mezu and Republic and Bourbon and Bubbles, and they own First Place as well. So it just, it was all brand new stuff, if I remember correctly, when it was First Place. So it was already a nice area, but they've made it even more fancy. It's very, very, very cool vibe inside of it. It's hard to get a good grasp on it since I was just there for a preview event. We'll see, what it's like as we go forward, the types of folks that go there, what the vibe is. But it was fun being there. Saw some familiar faces. Was nice to say hi to many people and meet some people in person that I've never met before, but have exchanged emails or social media messages or whatever. So it was cool. They had some, as usual with these types of events, some stuff you could order off the menu, some stuff they were giving away complimentary, and so they had some food going around. It was very tasty, all sorts of different things, some appetizer type dishes. So I'm excited to see what will remain on the menu or what they may debut, but the food was good. And yeah, it was nice. So definitely a cool spot to check out during the day. Traditional bar, you can show up, walk in, have fun. But at night, they're doing reservations only, at least for now, as they're expecting it to be pretty crowded in there. So it's going to be fairly similar to some of those other businesses I mentioned before. So, but should be a welcome addition to King Street. We have sports bars on King Street. This is just a little bit of a different vibe for a sports bar. So I think it'll do well. And I appreciated Lamar and Leva inviting me out. And again, so good to see all the other folks there. Now, I mentioned I have a big week ahead. It is crazy, and it hasn't really hit home yet for me. For those who don't know, I have a job outside of Holy City Center, and I've been at this job at the Medical University of South Carolina, MUSC, for 12 years now. I think it's 11 years was my anniversary at the job this summer. And I am leaving. My last day is this week. It's been a great job for me. Worked with some really good people, and it came along at a time where I needed a change of scenery as far as a job, and it was very good to me. Everybody has gripes about jobs, and of course I have plenty, and I could go on forever. And but it was a very good change of scenery for me, and also was the type of job where I could leave it at home for the most part, and it helped me grow Holy City Center. I had more time to work on the site and some other things. I had a set schedule for the most part, and anyway, it's been a very good job to me, but excited for the new adventure, which involves continuing to do Holy City Center full time, but I'll be partnering with a local company. I'll talk about it later in the week, perhaps, to give you some more details on it. But I'll be partnering with another local media company. They're going to maintain their website and their products as normal, and I will be doing the same. But we will be working together, and I'll give you some more details on that. So I'm excited, leaving one job, also nervous about that, of course, and going on a new endeavor, but excited and looking forward to it. And again, I'll tell you some more later on. The other big thing is I'm leaving this week for a mini trip over Labor Day weekend, kind of an extended Labor Day weekend. I will be heading out to Washington State. Looking forward to it. I haven't been out that far west since I was in college and went to San Diego. I've never been to Washington State, so looking forward to that. I'm going to spend basically the entire time at this place called the Gorge, which is a music amphitheater, but it's just this looks beautiful. I can't wait to finally see it in person. It's been something that I've wanted to do for years and years, and I'm excited to knock that off the bucket list. Yeah, it's a traditional amphitheater, but it's just the stage and seating, of course. There's no top, there's no roof, and behind is just this beautiful scenery, mountains and gorges and all that kind of stuff. So very, very much looking forward to it. I'm excited. Um, to go on this little adventure, and that'll be later this week. Well, shouldn't affect anything with the podcast. I should have everything recorded as normal and ready for you, but if there are any changes, I'll be sure to let you know. So very much looking forward to that. So lots of nervousness, excitement, and all the emotions as we start this new week for me. And that's enough about me. You're not here for that, although I appreciate you letting me ramble a bit and have my weekly therapy session with you all. But let's get into the latest local news. I mean, that's what you're here for, right? So let's get into it. On Friday, just a horrific tragedy took place. You're all probably familiar with it and seen it on the news and covered, and just an absolutely devastating tragedy on Daniel Island. Officials are investigating after a child was found dead inside of a car. This took place on Friday afternoon. Sergeant Anthony Gibson with the Charleston Police Department told WCBD News 2 that officers responded to a call for service regarding a child in a locked vehicle in the parking lot at Bishop England High School. Unfortunately, the child was pronounced dead at the scene by Berkeley County EMS. The Berkeley County coroner, Darnell Hartwell, told News 2 a staff member at Bishop England forgot her 16-month-old daughter. Forgot that she was in the back seat of her car. According to the coroner, the child was in the car from about 7:30 or 8 a.m. until around 4 p.m. when Charleston police and Berkeley County EMS arrived on the scene. Hartwell said that they were called after someone saw the unresponsive child in her car seat before breaking the window to get to her. Unfortunately, it was too late at that point. And according to Hartwell, the child would typically have been taken to daycare. So apparently the mother forgot the child had not been dropped off at daycare, forgot the child was in the car, and that's what led to this tragedy. As you know, it's been incredibly hot around here. I think the high temperature on Friday was 93 degrees. I think that's what I read. But of course, inside that car, it probably reached triple digits, according to the coroner. And obviously, it took, you know, when you do when the medical examiners, are looking into a death, even if it seems obvious, it's not official until they actually, go and do their examination. And so, as expected, on Saturday, Hartwell, the coroner, did say that it was indeed elevated heat temperatures that contributed to the child's death. To the death, excuse me. So far, no one has been taken into custody, and the coroner said it's too soon to say if there will be any criminal charges. So, just a completely heartbreaking situation, and everyone, it was Friday afternoon, and that broke, and it just terrible, terrible. Secondary to all that, but just so you're all aware, there was supposed to be a football game at the high school that was canceled, of course, and classes today, Monday, are also canceled. Again, those pieces of information clearly secondary to what occurred, but for those who may attend the school or know people who do, they are closed today. But just a horrible tragedy, and we'll see what happens if there's any charges or anything. But I can't even imagine what that poor family must be going through. And obviously, my thoughts, as I'm sure all of yours, are with them and anybody affected by this just unspeakable tragedy. A situation that certainly could have been very tragic seemingly is getting better and better as each day passes, and that's the story of Jennifer Drummond. Last week, she was released from the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, Georgia, to go back home here in the Charleston area. This, according to her family. If you don't remember, Drummond was the woman found unconscious at the foot of her driveway on Woodland Shores Road on James Island back on June 21st. There was some sort of accident, although no one has said for sure, at least authorities haven't said for sure what it was, although the belief seems to be she was hit by a car. And that amongst many injuries, she had some pretty significant brain injuries because of the accident. So, after spending 44 days at MUSC in early August, she was sent, or through early August, she was sent to an Atlanta facility, the one I mentioned before, for specialized treatment regarding her brain injury. And now, great news that she's back home. I mean, still a long road ahead for her, of course, but just she's had this horrible accident, but she is alive and she is making improvements every day. So it's definitely good news. At that specialized facility, Drummond received speech therapy to help her communicate with others. She's still having some issues with communication and remembering some things, of course, because of the brain injury, and hopefully, she'll continue to get better. As for the accident, the family is still hoping to get answers, as no one has come forward with any information to say what exactly happened, and there is still a $10,000 reward for information on the case. The Charleston County Sheriff's Office is still investigating. If you have any information on that accident, be sure to contact them immediately. Alec Murdaugh back in the news. This time, not as wild and crazy as we're used to with some of the stories involving the disbarred attorney and convicted killer. But this is of note. He is looking to go back on a recent not guilty plea as it relates to his federal financial charges. This is according to court records that local media picked up last week. According to those documents, Murdaugh was requesting a change of plea, which means he will now plead guilty. The court has scheduled the hearing for 10 a.m. on September 21st here in downtown Charleston. So at this time, local news, they have that information. It's not clear if there's going to be any kind of like deal with prosecutors that has been reached or will be reached. But regardless if there's a deal or not, he is intending to enter a plea of guilty. He originally pled not guilty on the 22 charges back in May, which include one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bank fraud, one count of bank fraud, and a total of 5 counts of wire fraud. There's also one count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and 14 counts of money laundering. An indictment alleges that Murdaugh, who was a personal injury attorney at a law firm in Hampton at the time that these alleged crimes took place, they say the indictment says that he engaged in 3 different schemes to obtain money and property from his personal injury clients. If he is convicted on all 22 counts, Murdaugh would face a total of up to 480 years in prison and fines of up to nearly $13 million. As far as the jail time, Murdaugh is already currently serving 2 life sentences for the June 2021 shooting death of his wife, Maggie, and their 22-year-old son, Paul. On the last episode, the big news, of course, was the South Carolina State Supreme Court ruling that the abortion ban, 6-week abortion ban, which is effectively an all outright abortion ban, was constitutional despite a previous version of the bill being ruled unconstitutional by a different court. Well, as I mentioned on that last episode, the terminology isn't even correct in the bill. And I was wondering if that would lead to any issues. Would anyone challenge this law based on the medical inaccuracies in the bill? And yes, someone will be. I'll get to that in a moment. But also doctors in the area and anybody who works in medical offices or a Planned Parenthood, they don't really know what to do either, because the law isn't written correctly. It does not have appropriate definitions, as I mentioned. So when the South Carolina Supreme Court upheld this ban on abortions last week, the majority who voted for it in the Supreme Court wrote that they were leaving for another day, in their words, a decision on when exactly the fetal heartbeat limit begins during pregnancy. So even when they said, "Hey, this is constitutional," they didn't even rule what constitutes the fetal heartbeat. And doctors and medical providers who are now having to deal with this extremely strict law. That's right, because doctors and providers can get charged with felonies uh, if they perform an abortion past the period they're supposed to. So, of course, they want to make sure they're doing the right things, but they can't just do what the Supreme Court did, which was basically punt this, like, we'll figure it out later. They can't do that. They are currently having to deal with this law as it is now in place. Physicians say that the statute's unclear guidance is already causing problems for medical practices at the few abortion clinics that operate here in South Carolina. With potential criminal charges hanging in the balance, like I said, most abortions are just being halted altogether as doctors try to figure out what exactly this law says and what it means. So the medical definitions, as I mentioned, that were put forward, um, are inaccurate. And Dr. Dawn Bingham, a chair of the South Carolina section of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, or AGOC, had this to say, quote, "These medical definitions they tried to put forward are legislative and put forward by people who don't practice medicine. This language creates uncertainty among medical providers who may be unsure they're legally allowed to terminate a pregnancy," end quote. Yes, that language is clinically inaccurate, as I've mentioned, and not because I'm super smart or anything. I looked into this and I've read articles, and this is the medical consensus: is that this is inaccurate. So terms like cardiac activity that are being used, it's not actually a heartbeat at that stage in the pregnancy, and it's also an embryo which has not even become a fetus at that stage. So when they're saying fetal heartbeat, both words are inaccurate as it relates to the time frame that they say, that's 6 weeks or less. So because of that, there is some confusion. So this past Thursday, abortion providers filed a petition for a rehearing based on what they call this ambiguity arising from the definition of "quote unquote" fetal heartbeat. So while some South Carolinians will remain eligible for abortions under this new law, unfortunately, Planned Parenthood is predicting that there's going to be widespread confusion resulting from that ruling. Um, Planned Parenthood's attorney Catherine Humphreyville told that to the Associated Press. In the meantime, as I mentioned, doctors have been canceling abortion appointments because they don't know what to do. The law is unclear. It's not using medically accurate definitions. And it's already, as I mentioned on Friday, causing all sorts of issues. And you can expect these to continue. So I would hope that by petitioning saying this law doesn't make sense, hopefully it'll be put on hold until they can firm up these inaccurate definitions and make sure that everybody knows exactly what is supposed to be going on, so that people who are in limbo right now, who may be perfectly eligible to get an abortion if that's what they need and want right now, but are not getting it because of the confusion. And it just, when it comes to medical stuff, you really should not be messing with people's medical needs. And I know that if someone needs an abortion because of there's some imminent harm coming to the person that's pregnant, those folks will still be able to get them during this waiting period. But it's just not fair that people who should be legally allowed to get one are having their appointments canceled because doctors aren't exactly sure what to do and what is legal and what is not. I mean, they're facing huge fines and a felony, which could result in jail time. Of course, they want to make sure they're doing the right thing. This needs to be cleared up as soon as possible. A confusing situation occurred on Friday night. There's still not a whole lot of details, but the Charleston County Sheriff's Office is investigating after a car was found in a pond with a deceased person inside. Again, this occurred on Friday night. Dive teams with the Charleston County Sheriff's Office were called to a pond on Turtle Marsh Lane around 7 p.m. after getting a report of a possible vehicle in the pond. Just before 11 p.m. during a search, the dive teams indeed found a vehicle and confirmed there was a body inside. Those same crews eventually recovered the vehicle and got it out of the pond. The Sheriff's Office Traffic Services Unit is investigating the death as a traffic fatality. If that is indeed what it turns out to be, it is the 13th traffic fatality investigated this year by Charleston County deputies. Forensic investigators were on the scene. They were investigating well into the night. And as of this recording, there were no new details really, and the victim's name had yet to be released. So, whatever occurred, obviously very sad and tragic, but is kind of bizarre. Did this person suffer a medical event and the car just rolled into the pond? Did they accidentally drive in the pond and couldn't get out? There really are no details at this time because they're investigating it as a traffic fatality. That's what it would seem like. So it would seem perhaps it was an accident or they had a medical event or something, and nothing nefarious as far as another individual being involved. But just a very confusing situation, and I'm sure more details will come out at another time. But as of now, we don't have a ton of answers. And lastly, we're going to talk about Martha Lou's, that incredible restaurant that closed a couple years ago. We talked in a previous podcast that the building is set to be demolished. But there is some good news that I can pass along. Not ideal. Of course, we would love if that restaurant had stayed open and the building, that very iconic pink building, stayed open, of course. But given the circumstances, we have some good news. So for 37 years, that small pink building, or as the Post and Courier like to call it, Pepto Pink, it sat on Charleston's Upper Peninsula and served so many people delicious Southern food. It was one of my favorite places to eat. And unfortunately, it did close in 2020. A year before the founder and the legendary cook, Martha Lou Gadsden, ultimately died at the age of 91. So it closed. She decided it was time to retire. And, unfortunately, the city's Board of Architectural Review did ultimately decide to allow the building that's sitting on Morrison Drive to be demolished. Certainly a sad day, but, it's one of those things that happens in a growing city. And the good news is that that iconic artwork that you see on the side of the building is going to be preserved. So we're happy to hear that. Gadsden's granddaughter, Melanie Alston, says she plans to preserve the artwork and signage and move them to a new restaurant that she is planning to open in North Charleston. So very good news. Some of those really recognizable pieces of art on the side of the building, as well as some signage and things, as I'm sure the family also had some stuff inside, the pictures on the wall and the mementos and memorabilia they had in there. I'm sure they've gotten all that as well already. So it's good that a lot of that will be preserved, even if the building itself is not going to be, and that there'll be a new home in North Charleston where people can go and see it and remember that their visits to that small building on Morrison Drive. So glad that it's surviving. I'm looking forward to finding out what exactly this restaurant Martha Lou's granddaughter is planning on opening. I can't wait. I'm assuming it's going to have some of her recipes from the restaurant, which will be great to have those back. It's been a long time. It's been a few years since we've had any food from that family. So it'd be great to have them back. So some good news for sure as it relates to Martha Lou's. That'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. Thank you so much for listening. And I forgot to say at the top, I apologize. The last episode's recording, that was my fault again. There was an error I had on my end where I recorded from my laptop's microphone versus my nice microphone that I normally record in. So that's why it didn't sound as good as it normally does. I apologize for that. After I recorded, I said, you know what? I'm not going to record that whole episode again. I am sorry. I sometimes you just don't want to redo something. So apologies, but thank you for listening, and hopefully you didn't mind too much. Speaking of, thank you to Cole Collins, who edits and produces each episode of Holy City Center Radio. This one will be much nicer for him to edit, I'm sure. And thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every episode as well. I hope you have a great week. You can support the podcast by liking, reviewing, subscribing, all of that good stuff. You can also go to holycitycenter.com/shop where you can pick up some merchandise, and go to patreon.com/holycitycenter where you can support everything involving HCS through one of those support tiers. Have a great rest of your week. Until Wednesday, good night and good luck.